Welcome to Verify in Field, the Millwork podcast. Your host, Jacob Edmond, CEO of Ductworks, will be interviewing experts in the industry to bring you insights and knowledge about the latest trends, techniques, and challenges in millwork. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting out, this podcast is for you. So sit back, relax, and join us as we explore the world of millwork. Here's Jacob.
We have Kristin MacRae, who is an organizing and efficiency consultant. And today we wanted to talk about organization and efficiency in the millwork industry. And Kristin and I actually work together. She's spent several years in the industry herself through her path to where she is now as an organization and efficiency consultant. So today, talking about organization and efficiency, we wanted to talk with Kristin about some efficiency tips for those of us working in the millwork industry. And she also has some background working as a C-suite executive assistant and has a great deal of experience utilizing her efficiency techniques as an individual contributor, as a manager, and as an assistant to business owners and leaders. So to begin with, can you tell us a little bit about your overall philosophy and how you approach organization and efficiency in business?
Sure. So thanks for having me, Jacob. So overall, I guess what it just comes down to is just having systems in place, really good systems, and implementing those systems and then following those systems on a day-to-day basis. Because as you know, there are so many distractions in the workplace. But when you have really good systems in place and you follow them on a daily basis, there might be a hiccup that occurs during the day. But if you have those good systems in place, you'll go right back to following those systems throughout the day.
Right. Awesome. That makes a lot of sense. And I know we'll come back to this, but you talk a lot about eliminating kind of the crazy and the chaos as kind of getting to that point of your baseline. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And so in that, we are talking about that as it relates to people in the millwork industry and how we can use those tips regardless of where you work in this business. A lot of people are individual contributors, might not have a lot of influence in their business, but there's also a lot of this that is valuable for managers and people who have direct reports and business owners.
Yes.
So I think that's the important part. The tips you recommend and how you work with your clients is very low tech, very simple. There's not a lot of requirements for it. Anybody can utilize this, right?
Yes, correct. So I always say the simpler the system, the easier it is to follow. A lot of times to make things super complicated, and it doesn't need to be that complicated. So it's all about, again, creating that system and then tweaking it to make it work better for you. You can revisit that system in 3 months, 6 months. If it's not working for you, tweak it. So many people work with that system, it fails, and then they don't go back and rework the system. So it's really about just having those good systems and revisiting them.
Right. That makes sense. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, how you got started with organization and efficiency, and then how you ended up spending some time working in the millwork industry yourself, and then your path to your current role as a consultant?
Yeah, sure. So I started my business in 2012 in Rhode Island. I knew there was a need for this type of organizing efficiency. I was in multiple offices from like the 90s through the 2000s where I'd bounce around. Rhode Island's a very small state. Everybody knows everybody. So once they found out I was working in offices and I was turning them around, they said, come fix our office. But I was just working in these offices as an employee, and I could see the efficiencies. There were no systems in place, no filing systems, no processes. And I would go in and I said, I can't work like this. So I would basically revamp, whether it was the billing office or just the admin part of the office in these medical offices, and flip them and make them work better just by creating these really good systems. And from there, I knew there's a need for this. So I started my business in 2012, and then it transferred into the home and organizing your home because it was just an easy transition. But I also obviously focused on the businesses. In 2019, we moved to Houston, Georgia. And at that point, I let my business go. I sold my client list up north, and I wanted to go back into the workforce. So I kept applying to jobs. And again, this was the first time I was in the workforce since 2011. So that's a good span being out of the workforce, working for myself. I mean, I had 650 clients. I gave over 100 presentations. So what happens is you're so used to working for yourself that now I'm going in the workforce, and it was a little different. So I just kept applying to admin jobs, executive assistant jobs, whatever I could apply to. And it took me a good 2 months to find a job. And then I found this job at CCI, RIV, and the position was initially for an administrative assistant. Well, I got hired when I started working there, like the first few days. They're like, we need you as our purchaser. So I started working in purchasing, and I had no purchasing experience, but I had, the organizational skill set. You train me, I can figure out processes and implement them. So I worked there for about a year, and then I went to USAM, and I stayed there for about 8 months, and then we moved to Florida. So that's when I decided to start my business again in 2022. Sorry, that was a little long-winded, but
Okay.
that's the process.
Yeah, no, awesome.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And in your time prior to Millwork, right, you were working as an individual contributor in businesses is when you really first got into organization. Were there any like significant milestones where you remember where you went from just, hey, this is something that I'm learning for myself, to, oh, this is actually like a serious, career, or something that where I can be an expert in a kind of a knowledge leader in organization and efficiency?
So it was office after office after office. I can't tell you how many times I bounced around in different offices, and I could just see the inefficiencies. And at one point in 2012, I was just like, there's a need for this. And I kind of just hit the ground running and just refused to fail, went full force ahead, and using that skill set that I have, and I was able to implement it. It was just easy to transition my business into that and then just go into these offices, because I was basically doing the same thing when I was working in them as an employee. So it was just easy to start my business. And I do have the business mindset too. My dad owns he's retired now, but he had a nursery, and he's a landscape architect. My grandparents were the small business owners. So I've always wanted to have my own business. So I have that small business mindset also, which also helped, because you can't just because I'm organized and efficient didn't mean I could start a business. So I feel like I had that background too to propel forward.
What were some of the things, the more common things you would find that you would first implement or be helping those businesses with to get organized? Like, what were some of the most common, I guess, disorganizations that they had? So
the first thing is the physical organization. So you're walking in an office, and it could be any office. I feel like every office has the same issues. If you're in a physical office, it's maybe the filing systems, maybe it's the calendar management, email management, to-do lists. But getting physically organized first is so important, and then we work on time management, email management, all of that. But we're in this digital age now too, where a lot of paper isn't around anymore. But a lot of people still work with paper, which is perfectly fine. So we just have to get you organized with your paper, but then digitally organize your desktop, because we want to mirror that off the way you would file in a filing system. So that's important too.
Yeah, that's a good point. So there's organization of our physical space, your environment, your desk, your office, your filing systems, and then there's a digital organization as well. Emails, desktop files, right? And you just mentioned you work with both of those. Yeah. How important though is just your physical organization of your space, as far as just your effectiveness and productivity as a worker, your mental space, what are the things and kind of the goals that affects for people?
Sure. It's so, so important, because a lot of people will say, oh, my drawer isn't organized, not a big deal, it's just a drawer. But then the desk isn't organized, not a big deal. They say bookshelves, but all these little things add up. So if you're disorganized, you're wasting, it could be hours at the end of the week when you're looking for things. You're touching 5 things before you find the exact thing you need. So even though some people say, oh, well, it's just a drawer, it's just a desk. But on a whole, if you look at that office, you're wasting so much time looking for things. You're creating inefficiencies. So it's so important to get that physical organized, because you don't realize how much time. That could get you up to 10 hours a week extra just by being physically and digitally organized, and with your calendar and all things like that. So people don't realize that it's a big deal. Again, just think about how long it's taking you to find things and how many things you're touching before you find what you need.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Just the efficiency, even though it might not feel like much in the moment, it adds up over time. Or it could be, something that's critical a few times that can have a big impact.
Right. And that leads to mental clutter too, because say you walk into your office first thing Monday morning and it's cluttered. And now you're like, okay, now you're distracted because is there something in one of those piles I forgot to do? Is there something important in that pile that I needed to do last week that I forgot to do? So that turns into mental clutter. And then that mental clutter will decrease your productivity because now you're totally distracted and it's Monday morning and now you're already on the wrong foot for the tone of the week.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's important, because we think about like, okay, why should somebody, anybody listening to this, like what motivation do we have, one, to get organized and to gain efficiency? Obviously there's your efficiency and your productivity of your business, right? You want to get more done with less time. And if you're a business owner, that means, hey, I'm going to, be more efficient and hopefully save money or make more money for my business. But as even just an individual contributor, you talked about your kind of the mental clutter. And I know we've talked about this in the past of like, okay, just for your own personal sanity and stress management. Because I feel like so many people, you think about like, okay, one side of this is, hey, I want to be more effective for my business. Yeah. But honestly, for most people, the bigger side is, hey, how do I just not go into work and be stressed all the time related to work? Because, there's plenty of high stress jobs that function. ER doctors, right? Emergency rooms that they live in that high stress, but they have systems and processes to triage things. So how do we kind of bring that and what you bring to businesses and organization that it helps manage stress and set us up for the long term with systems?
Yeah. So if you're working in a high stress job, which Millwork usually is because you're running on deadlines constantly, that and you're disorganized on top of that, you're totally stressed out during the day. You never get that calm during the day because those systems aren't there, the processes aren't there, and now you're already adding to the stress. So my philosophy is get everything out of your head. Again, first you have to get physically organized. Once you're physically organized, then we're going to work on this, dealing with a big part of the mental clutter. It's about calendar management, looking at your calendar and utilizing to-do lists. Look at deadlines. Like Millwork, I know deadlines is a huge thing. Even in purchasing, it was like you have to have that material in on a certain point for when that project, they start working on that project. You have deadlines of when the project needs to get done. Back and date, put your deadline on your calendar. And if you have to use a paper calendar, please use it. There are so many people who feel like digital calendars are the thing. Everybody's doing it. I need to do it. A lot of people don't work well with a digital calendar, and that's okay. I still use a paper calendar, and it's very effective for me, and I never missed a deadline. So don't be scared to go back to paper if that's what works for you. So many people, when they're disorganized, feel like, well, my life will be so much easier if it's digital. But if you're not organized, nothing's going to get you, an app isn't going to work for you if you're not organized. So I think the biggest tip I can give is put that deadline on your calendar and then backdate everything that you need to do up until that deadline. Mark it out on the calendar to remind yourself that, like at month 1, you need to order the supplies, or month 2, you need to work on, if you're a project manager, there's certain things you need to work on throughout the project. Don't be afraid to mark up your calendar with everything that you need to do along the way to get you to that deadline. So many people don't do that, and what happens is things fall off the cracks. Little deadlines get missed in between. You're showing up to meetings unprepared. So think about that deadline and then backtracking and marking up your entire calendar when you get that deadline.
Right.
That helps.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So, and you talked about this, like a lot of people think they need to go digital, but I would venture to say that a lot of people who think that are probably already using paper, but it's not organized, right? So, I can think of how many people I walked into their office and there's Post-it notes all over the place, or even just scratched paper notes that they carry with them, but there's no system to it, right?
Exactly.
And so they probably think like, hey, if I go digital, that'll help me get organized. But to me, probably that if they're already using paper, that probably already shows their tendency, right? They just need a system of how to do it better.
Yes.
I assume, right?
So when I come in, I'm going to say, and I work with clients digitally too, I'm going to say, what's on those sticky notes? Let's break this whole thing down. What's on the sticky notes? And they're like, well, I have to remember to do this on the 26th of April. Well, put that on your calendar on the 26th of April. look at your sticky notes, figure out what those notes are, and if you can get them into your calendar. So when that day comes up, you know what you have to tackle that day. So now, again, those sticky notes are a distraction. You're wondering what's on those notes. Am I forgetting to do something? So when I come into an office, it's all about the physical, but then I want to sit with them and go through every single thing, all that paper in their office, so we can either eliminate certain things and create new systems or figure out a better way for them to function. But it's always that you have to have that conversation and talk about what's your day like right now? Why is it chaotic to you? And then I'm going to walk through a full day with them. And then we're going to rein it in, and I'm going to help them create systems based on how they function.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
So within this, let's break it down a little bit by type of, maybe listener we have. So first, talking about individual contributors. So thinking back, to individual contributors maybe that you've helped, but also yourself, right? You've worked as an individual contributor, and particularly in Millwork, as a buyer, as an admin, as an operations manager. So what are some things that those people who may not be managing anybody else, they're focused on what they're doing and probably don't have a lot of influence over processes. However, they are affected by the disorganization around them, right? Or maybe just particular disorganized individuals. Like, what are some things that they can do as individual contributors first for their own productivity, and then to kind of manage everybody around them, not taking them out of that?
Yeah. So it's so important, again, to be organized. But one topic that comes to mind is if you're an administrative assistant, or you're working side by side with an employer, or you're a purchaser, a project manager, whatever it is, you have a report, someone you report to. So they're counting on you to get your job done, and they don't want to have to micromanage you. I'm sure they don't want to have to micromanage you. So I want you to make sure that you're having a one-on-one with them every week, you're communicating with them, but not only that you're, as the contributor, following up and letting them know if you have a deadline, that here's where I am every Tuesday with that project. So they're not thinking, and that's the mental clutter that's going to be released to them too. They don't have to worry about, is this project getting done? Where are we in the process? Open those lines of communication, and every week, maybe on a Tuesday, whatever day works for you, follow up and say, this is where I am with this project. So they have faith in you that the project's getting done, or if those products are getting ordered, or whatever it may be in that sense. So the communication is key, and them having faith in you, knowing you're organized with the project. Also, so many times in Millwork too, there's not a lot of training that goes on. So you get dropped in this position. Well, especially me. So I had no Millwork experience. I was coming in as an admin, but they wanted me to go right into purchasing. So I had no experience. But when I didn't get trained, the little training I had to put my organization skills into motion and say, okay, I know I have to purchase, I have this responsibility, but now what am I going to do with it? So I had marked up my calendar when I had to order certain things. Like you have to be organized with that, your position, whether you're a project manager, whatever it is. Put that system in place for yourself. And that system might not work for the person who's sitting next to you. It has to work for you. So think about how you function throughout the day. Maybe you want to check your emails a certain time during the day. Maybe you want to check voicemails a certain time in the day. Have that system in place, so that way when that fire comes at you, you're not going to be stressed out when that fire is taken care of, because you can go right back to your process that you work through during the day, if that helps. Right.
Yeah, definitely. So I think, one thing you just mentioned that really, I think resonates and what I'll call out is, having your systems and process, and you're going to get pulled out of that by the business, by other disorganized people, by your manager,
day,
right?
Right.
And having that, though, to come back to recenter yourself in your process. And okay, I'm organized, so that when I get pulled out of that, I come back and I know whether it's your calendar instead of a stack of Post-it notes, whether it's your to-do list, that you have organization that you can go right back into and just pull that new task into it. Exactly. Additionally, that even though you're an individual contributor, you have internal or external customers. Basically, you're managing yourself, but you're really also managing your customers. So if it's your manager, you're an executive assistant or just, an individual contributor, you're having to manage what their expectations are of you in a way that you're helping organize their expectations. So if it's, hey, I need this done by this date. Okay, you're now tracking that as your own deliverable, but also tracking the communication with them back of saying, hey, I'm not going to wait for them to ask me for an update. I'm going to tell them and I'm going to deliver on, hey, I'm going to update you every Monday on this. Like we have these weekly one-on-ones and I'm going to tell you so that because there's that stress also that you get, even if you're a business owner, you have people, customers, internal, external, that are waiting on something. And even if you're behind, update them and say, hey, here's where I'm at. I've moved that stress now and I'm just going to keep, chipping away at this.
Yeah. And it gives your external customers peace of mind because they're going to have confidence in that the job's on time, that you're working through it. You don't want to leave them out of this either, where you're not communicating with them and they're wondering where you are and then the project is late. But so they'll have communication all the way through up until this project is done, and they'll thank you for it because they have peace of mind that this project's going to be completed. But it's just I can't stress enough. And then just you want to give a good impression too when wherever you're working with in your office, for them to know that they have confidence in you, that whatever you're doing, they don't have to think that, oh, this is going to fall through the cracks.
Right. Well, and I think that is, ultimately, and you're proof of this, the way that if your goal is to move up or move to another position or just to earn more influence in your business, to be able to say, hey, I'm organized. I'd like the business to be organized. Now you can show, well, what I'm doing is working. I'm delivering results. People are seeing that and they like working with me and delegating things to me because I'm delivering that in an organized way and consistently. That's how you kind of earn favor and trust in, okay, they can take on more, they can handle more because of this organization.
Yes.
So also you have, experience as a C-suite executive assistant, and I'm sure in that, in many positions, you have experience working with executives who are business owners who are busy and probably very disorganized themselves. What tips might you have for people who are working under disorganized managers? I know we talked a little bit about, hey, if they're expecting things, how do you manage that? What other advice might you have?
Yeah, so if you're reporting to a CEO, you just want to make sure, again, the lines of communication are open. And if there's anything you can help them with the disorganization, if you're an organized EA, just step in and say, is there anything I can help you? Can I take this off your plate? Would this help if I took on this work to make your life easier? Because a lot of times CEOs don't realize that they have a hard time letting go of certain things. So if whatever you could put on your EA, do it. If she's organized, she'll be able to take it on. And it's just a matter of having that. It's all about communication. I can't stress that enough. And just being able to communicate and let them know, where you are with certain projects and how you could help them further if there's anything that you can take off their plate, or help them get organized in certain areas. Sometimes they're like, well, I don't need to be organized. I have my EA to do that. But you might be able to, your habits might rub off on them a little bit. And then it creates a nice flow for the day for everybody.
Right. That makes sense. You talked about communication. Obviously there's multiple avenues of communication. There's phone calls, there's emails, there's chats now and text messages. What are some things that you have seen that may be coming from this that cause disorganization and ways to kind of to combat that?
Too many emails on one subject. I'm old school, pick up the phone. Can you imagine how many emails, how much time has been wasted on one question going back and forth because you don't understand what the person said? It could get miscommunicated. You could have taken it the wrong way. Where if you just picked up the phone and talked to that person, it could be like a 2-minute phone call. But you just wasted 10 emails and probably a half an hour or an hour throughout the week of this one email. And then the email gets stuck somewhere and then you don't follow up. And so that one phone call could eliminate everything. I know people say, oh, well, I don't want to talk on the phone, or it takes, time out of my day to pick up the phone. It's going to take you less time to pick up the phone, talk to that person for 2 minutes and be done with it. And you'll have a solution. You won't have to wait till Friday until they see that email again to follow up. So that's the best piece of advice I can get. Pick up the phone for 2 minutes and speak to someone. Or during your one-on-one, bring it up then and it can get handled unless it's an emergency. You need to speak to them right away. But I can't stress that enough, how important it is. Lines get crossed too often it gets misinterpreted, and it could go on for weeks, the email.
Right. I'm sure that was extremely valuable in how you worked as a buyer, right? You could have tons of emails back and forth with the vendor, I assume, right? But a lot of times it's just, hey, let me get on the phone. And we used to, I used to tell my drafter this, a lot of times PMs of okay, email is great as a record But, to get stuff done, get on the phone and then follow up with, hey, we just discussed this. I'm putting it here in an email, but the information's already been conveyed. We've solved the problem in the phone call, right? And as a buyer, I'm sure that's very common. You're talking to all these buyers, right? And then, okay, now I've got it. I've got a PO. I'm documenting it here, but we got the issue resolved, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I can't tell you how many times like a product was late or it didn't come in, and it's not worth sending an email. You just pick up the phone, talk to them right away. And then, it's easier to, I can't tell you how many times too I had to ask for credits because the product came in wrong. It wasn't what I ordered. You have a good rapport when you pick up the phone, you talk to them and they're saying, oh, Kenny, great. We'll credit that for you. It was our mistake. We'll credit it. But when you're going back and forth, you can't build a rapport with people that way. So talking on the phone, you build that rapport and they get to know you. And obviously you're not calling them for, random things that you think about what if you could find the answer first before you talk to them. You're only calling them for things you need an immediate answer to that need to get handled. So
right. Well, a lot of times too, like you're gonna get, people are gonna treat you differently on the phone. Like it might come across as passive aggressive, or it might actually be aggressive there. Whereas I find a lot of times when even in a conflict situation, you get on the phone and it's like, hey, we're two people just talking. Like, nobody really wants to actually have that type of conflict. And a lot of times you can get there faster just with having a regular conversation.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
How about advice now for managers? Those that are directly responsible for employees, or maybe they have influence over processes and systems, and what should they be thinking about in helping their people be more organized and efficient, and in ways that maybe they should influence their people around organization and efficiency?
So sometimes people are afraid to talk about being disorganized. They're embarrassed by it. They don't want to talk about it. It's like this taboo word. They feel like they'll be judged differently. Honestly, what I would do is grab your team, put them in a room together, or take them one by one if you don't want to embarrass anybody, and just talk to them about their organization skills. Do you have the skill set? Where do you have? I feel like it's not talked about enough too if they're not organized. Do you need help? Do you need help setting up systems? I can't tell you how many times in offices I've worked in, people come to me like, Kristin, can you help me get organized? Like, I see you're really organized. Can you come over into my desk and talk to me and how I can be more efficient? So if they're disorganized, just have that conversation with them. They might need help, but they're embarrassed to ask for it. And then they'll thrive, because organizing is a skill set. It's just about giving them that. They don't know where to start. So give them that little push to say, all right, let's have that conversation, and then say, well, where are you struggling? Is it your filing system? Is it your computer? Is it your desktop? The organization there? Is it calendar? Are you falling behind on emails? Everything that encompasses being organized, talk to them about, because you'll be amazed at they want that structure. They want to be organized and they don't know how to get there. I can guarantee they don't know how to start. They're overwhelmed. They're stuck. So it's so important for a manager to talk to their employees about that, or bring in someone like me who can sit and talk to everybody and because the manager could be disorganized. Very often you'll find the manager disorganized, so he can't help anybody because he can't get out of his own way and, set up systems. So you have to think about the manager might be holding his team back because the team can't get help because the manager can't help them, or can't or sees that they're performing like he is or she is, and nobody can get help. The resources aren't there. So it's such a good conversation to have in the office because, if it were a perfect world, we'd hire everybody that was organized, right? And the office would just be a free-flowing, well-oiled machine. But that's not the case all the time. So bringing in someone who's organized, who has a business to be able to consult with everybody is a great way to get the whole team organized. And not everyone is going to be 100% organized after that. It's going to take years sometimes, months, years. There's a process to keep going through the organization steps to get you to the next level. But if we just give you the basic steps initially, it's so easy to continue forward because they're going to see that they're saving time throughout the week. And they're going to be like, oh, how can I take this to the next level now that I have my emails under control or have my calendar under control? So I think sometimes managers take it for granted that sometimes people want help, but they don't know how to get it.
Right. No, I think that's great. And a lot of times as managers, in general, it's very common, especially in Millwork, that managers are individual contributors that were successful and probably promoted. A lot of people know about the Peter principle. You're kind of promoted till failure, right? But there's not really, as you said, even with new employees, any training, any development, right? And so one, if you are investing in yourself and learning about organization, especially if you're a manager and you have influence, try to influence your team and utilize those tools. And somebody like Kristin, like she said, is available. There are resources out there for this that I think, honestly, a lot of people don't know this is a thing, right? Organization consultant, efficiency consultant, right? But everything is a thing at this day and age, right? And there's people who specialize in these skills that are learnable, teachable skills, right? I think a lot of people see it as probably a personality trait. Oh, I'm just organized. And oh, I'm just disorganized. That's just the way I am. But these are all just like anything else. They're skills that you can learn and tools that you can be equipped with.
Exactly. Yes.
What are some, you mentioned like you have a calendar, right? I assume that's some sort of book or agenda that you carry. Do you have a favorite?
Yeah, I have it right here. I have a, just an at a glance 2023 calendar, and I highlight it. It's all colored up, but it's not the pretty. Like, it's not people like, oh, is it perfectly pretty and this and that? No, it doesn't have to be. Being organized in, everything's on my calendar, color coded. Like, I color code by clients when I'm networking, personal things, and then if there's crossouts on it and there's sticks on it, it's not perfect. I'm not like OCD in that sense, and you don't have to be as long as you have that system in place. But I don't work well with the digital calendar, saying this works well for me. Again, if you work well with a digital calendar, great, but you have to have that system to maintain that digital calendar, and you're marking it up, and just as you would a paper calendar. So it's you build your daily to-do list off your calendar. So you have to work on the daily to-do list. It's so important. And you could on a Friday, I want you to look at your week ahead, see what's going on each day, have that daily to-do list, and then the night before you leave from work, look at what you have coming up the next morning. See what's on your plate for the next day. And then whatever doesn't get taken care of because, of course, those fires come in, move it to the next day. But it's so important to have that daily to-do list based off your calendar because that's how you're going to function like a well-oiled machine during the day.
Right. Do you, how many years of those would you say you have?
My calendar?
Yeah, like do you have previous years' books that you...
No, I get rid of them after 2 years. I get rid of them. But I've been using calendars since I was probably 8 years old, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like it started with the wall calendar because, I had dance classes to go to, events, parties, dances, all things like that. And my mom gave me a calendar and said, here, mark everything on your calendar that you do. And from there, it transitioned to all different kind of calendars.
Wow. But you don't keep them. See, that's probably tells you a lot about me. I come from a family of, pack rats, right? And my instinct is, hey, hold on to that, right?
Yeah.
And honestly, I can remember back probably almost 10 years ago now, when I was an individual contributor and engineer, I used to keep my own personal Google Calendar where I would just mark off things that I completed through that day. Okay. And I liked being able to look back 6 months or a year and be able to say, oh, well, this was when that project was active and this is what I got done in a day. I was able to kind of prove to myself productivity and mentally. Yeah. I was able to show, hey, I'm actually getting stuff done even though I'm not. But that kind of historical, being able to kind of look back and sometimes see, oh, I actually did make progress.
Yeah, that's
or just, hey, when was that?
Yep. Preference.
But even through all that, like I've always tried, to be digital. Like I'm very digitally minded, but I've always found myself, even when I've had asanas and planners, all these things that I always had in the office. I used to have a legal pad that I would kind of write things down because a lot of times you find yourself in, especially as an engineer, right? The shop comes in or people come in as you're in the middle of other things. So I'll write them down and then kind of at the end of the day, I would regroup that into what's still left. Now that's tomorrow's to-do list.
Nice.
And even now, and I did a video recently. I have this Remarkable, right?
I saw that. Essentially, it's just that's phenomenal. That Remarkable is pretty cool.
Yeah, essentially, it's the same thing as paper, though. You know, like it's a page. Then I have a to-do list that I handwrite, and I now start to do the same thing. I'll copy it and remove the things that are done, and I kind of refresh it. And that, for me, what I've found, even in the mental space of digital, like handwriting it, there's something about that kind of like removes that stress. Of like, okay, now I know that I've got it documented down. Even like I don't have to actually remember. I just need to know every day I'm going to look at this list, and the things I need to remember are there. And you get into that almost ritual of like in the morning before, or Monday mornings for me, a lot of times it's like, okay, what do I need to do this week? And of those things, what do I need to do today? Now I've got that written down. I'm kind of centered and I can go about my day and not have all this like weight on my shoulders.
Yeah, because again, it adds to that mental clutter. It amazes me when people say they keep things in their head. Like, I'd love to know what's floating around there. It's got to be like chaos up there because it's so gratifying to writing things down and having a separate to-do list for every day and then playing off your email, and it all works together. Email, calendars, and to-do lists, they all intertwine together. And if you have a really good system like that, then you're golden, because that's where a lot of your work is done during the day now.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, if any of our listeners are interested in finding out more about you, finding out about Kristin MacRae, reaching out to you for help with organizing, where should they go? How do they find you?
So you can go to my website. It's KristinMacRae.com, and it's KristinMacRae.com, or support@KristinMacRae.com. Or you can call me at 401-3. You can pick up the phone. It'll be a quick call. 401-323-1165.
Awesome. And I know, from there, I'm sure they'll find you on all your socials.
Yeah.
LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, right?
Exactly.
Is there any final thoughts you'd like to share?
No, just that I don't think enough stress is put on how important it is to be organized in millwork, because the 2 millwork companies I worked for, you find there's some disorganization there, and the systems aren't there, and you kind of have to build your own in the seat that you're in. So I would just say to any millwork owners, or just, there is such a value in having people who are organized in those seats, and how important. I don't think enough stress is put on how important it is to be organized and have really good systems in place in the company as a whole, having great systems and processes in place. And I think you'll find that things will run much smoother. Yes.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I think particularly in millwork, it's very common that people think about that in the context of their shop, right? Or in the context of manufacturing, which is the core of what they do.
Yes.
But very little of them, they struggle with carrying that into the front office, the business side of things, right? And just, so I think that that's important for people to realize. One, if they struggle with that, they don't know where to start. There's resources like Kristin out here to help with it, who've done it. And that's what they specialize in. But that it is something that has value and adds value for your people and your business.
Yes, definitely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining today, Kristin. I really appreciate you coming and speaking to our listeners about organization and efficiency.
Thank you.
And hopefully we'll be able to do this again soon and dive a little deeper.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Jacob.
Thanks, Kristin.
Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Do you want to stay up to date about industry insights, new content, and our community of millworkers? Go to ductworksmw.com to sign up for our newsletter. I'll see you in the next episode of Verify in Field.